I keep telling myself I'm not the kind of person who holds grudges. I really do. I say it out loud sometimes, almost like a prayer. You're not bitter. You're past it. You turned out fine. But then Christmas comes around and I'm sitting at my grandmother's dining room table in that big house in Connecticut. The one with the wraparound porch and the chandelier that's too heavy for the ceiling. The one that always smells like cinnamon and old money. And I look at my mother across the table and something tightens in my chest like a fist closing around a wire. I was 26 the Christmas everything came apart. I'd driven 4 hours from my apartment in Pittsburgh. The apartment I shared with 2 roommates because rent in any city will absolutely destroy you when you're 26 and working as a staff writer for a regional magazine that pays you like they're doing you a personal favor. I drove my 2011 Honda Civic with the cracked dashboard and the passenger window that wouldn't roll all the way up. And I told myself the whole drive that this year would be different. This year I would just eat the food and be grateful and not let anything get under my skin. My grandmother had set the table the way she always does. Cloth napkins, the good china, the silver candlesticks that came over from Poland before World War II. She's small and sharp-eyed and she makes her own pierogi from scratch every year even though her hands bother her now. I love her more than I have words for. My grandfather sat at the head of the table the way he always does, quiet and watchful, and the cardigan my grandmother bought him 3 years ago that he still treats like it's new. He built his money slowly, methodically, over 50 years, commercial real estate, careful investments, nothing flashy. He's not the kind of man who talks about it. He never has been. My parents were there. My mother in the red dress she wears every Christmas, the one she bought the year I graduated high school. My father, already on his second glass of wine before we'd even passed the rolls. My younger brother was there too, home from his second year at Penn State, talking loudly about a startup idea he had with his roommate. The kind of idea that sounds different every time he explains it, but always ends with someone giving him money. And I was there, sitting between my grandmother and my cousin, trying to feel like I belonged to all of it. The thing about growing up with wealthy grandparents when your parents are perpetually broke is that it does something to your sense of reality. You spend summers in a house that has a guest cottage and a proper garden, and then you go home to a 2-bedroom apartment where the heat cuts out in February and your dad is on the phone with the bank with the door closed. You learn early that love and money are not the same thing, but you also learn that money is a language, and some people are fluent and some people are just faking it. My parents had been faking it my whole life. I didn't fully understand that until I was 26. Sitting at that table, listening to my grandfather say something that stopped all the noise in my head. He was talking to my mother, casually, the way you'd ask about the weather. He'd just finished complimenting the potatoes, my grandmother's potatoes, buttered and perfect. And he set down his fork and looked at my mother and said, "We're so glad everything worked out for Nadia. The fund we set up for her, it sounds like it made a real difference getting her started." I looked up from my plate. My mother smiled. That particular smile she has, closed, controlled, just slightly too wide. "Of course," she said. "She's done so well." My grandfather nodded, satisfied, and reached for his wine. And I sat there. The fund we set up for her. I thought I'd misheard. I actually looked at my grandmother. Like, maybe she could explain what the word fund meant in this context, because as far as I knew, I had paid for college the way most people pay for college. Loans, work study, a scholarship I'd sweated through 3 application essays to get, and a waitressing job I'd worked every weekend for 3 years. I had $31,000 in student loan debt. I had checked that number the week before because I was trying to figure out if I could finally start paying more than the minimum. "I'm sorry," I said. My voice came out strange, quieter than I meant it to. "What fund?" My grandfather looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Confused. Almost. Gently confused, the way you'd look at someone who just asked you what a spoon was. "The education fund," he said. "We started it when you were born. Your parents have been managing it." Managing it. I heard my brother put his fork down. I heard my mother say my name, low and warning, like I was 7 years old and about to make a scene in the grocery store. I didn't look at her. "I didn't know about a fund," I said. I was speaking directly to my grandfather now. "I took out loans. I worked. I had a partial scholarship. I paused. I have $31,000 in debt. The table went very quiet. My grandmother set down her water glass. My grandfather looked at my mother. I looked at my mother. And my mother, and this is the part I will never forget, not ever, not for the rest of my life. My mother looked down at her plate and said, "We had to make some decisions as a family." As a family. My father cleared his throat. "Things were tight," he said. "For a few years there, we always intended to." "How much?" my grandfather said. His voice had changed. I'd never heard that register from him before. Quiet, but with an edge underneath it like something very cold. My father looked at my mother. "Approximately 42,000, my mother said, still looking at her plate. "Over several years." My grandfather said nothing, he just looked at her. And then he looked at me. And I watched something happen in his face that I don't have the right word for. Not anger exactly, though that was there too. Something more like grief, like watching someone realize they'd made a mistake they couldn't take back. "That money," he said slowly, "was for Nadia's education. We discussed this with you explicitly." "I know," my mother said. "We made an agreement." "I know, Dad." "Then what did you spend it on?" Another silence. My brother was staring at the centerpiece like it contained the answers to everything. "The mortgage for a while," my father said. "Some of it. And when Oliver needed braces, the orthodontist it was a lot, all at once, and we thought we could replace it and then." "And then you didn't," my grandfather said. My father stopped talking. I became aware that my hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs under the table and tried to breathe normally, tried to stay in my body, tried not to make this Christmas dinner into something I could never undo. But the math was happening in my head without my permission. $42,000. 4 years of weekend shifts at the Italian place on Forbes Avenue. Boxed pasta and $5 bottles of wine. The semester I seriously considered dropping out because I was so tired I kept falling asleep on the bus home from my night class. $31,000 of debt that would take me a decade to pay off on a magazine salary. And the whole time, somewhere, there was a fund, with my name on it, being managed. "I need to step out for a minute," I said. I didn't wait for anyone to respond. I got up and walked through the kitchen and out the back door and stood on my grandmother's porch in my dress and my good shoes and breathed the December air until my eyes stopped burning. My grandmother came out 5 minutes later with a cup of tea she'd made so fast I don't know how it was possible. She sat down beside me on the porch swing without saying anything, just handed me the cup, wool blanket over her lap, watching the backyard in the dark. "Did you know?" I asked. "No," she said. "We gave them the fund to manage because we thought it would be simpler. We trusted them." She paused. "We should have managed it ourselves. That was our mistake." She said it clearly, without drama, just a fact she was handing me. We sat out there for a while. I drank the tea and tried to figure out what I was actually feeling underneath the shaking. It wasn't just anger, though I was angry, it was something older than that. A retroactive grief for the girl who'd been working double shifts while her parents had $42,000 of her money sitting somewhere, getting slowly spent on a mortgage and braces and whatever else qualified as a family decision. When we went back inside, the table had been mostly cleared. My grandmother had apparently sent my parents to the living room. My grandfather was still at the table, alone, turning his wine glass slowly in his hands. He looked up when I came in. "Sit down," he said. I sat. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I owe you an apology. We should have structured this differently, kept control of it ourselves, or put it directly in your name when you turned 18. We made it too easy for them to access." "It wasn't your fault," I said. "It was partly our design," he said, "and I won't pretend otherwise." He reached into his jacket, and I still don't know why he had this with him at Christmas dinner, unless maybe my grandmother had said something to him, or maybe he just always carried it. I've never asked, and he put an envelope on the table between us. "That's $20,000, he said. "It's what I can put together without liquidating things that would take time. I want to be honest with you about that. It isn't the full amount. but I want you to put it directly toward your loans. $20,000. Not 42, not the full amount. And I had a half second where I felt that registered it the way you register a thing you expected to feel differently about. But then I looked at his face. At 78 years old, and the cardigan my grandmother bought him, and the careful, level way he was looking at me, not with guilt or performance, just with the plain intention of a man trying to do right by someone he'd failed to protect. I'm also calling my attorney on Monday, he said. What your parents did was not legal. The fund was established with specific terms. I don't know yet what the remedy looks like, but I intend to find out. I nodded. My throat was very tight. You didn't deserve this, he said. Whatever else is complicated in this family, and I know it is, that part is not complicated. I didn't cry until I was back in my car, in the dark driveway, alone. I sat there for probably 15 minutes just letting it happen. The ugly kind of crying where you're not even sad exactly. You're just releasing pressure that's been building for a long time without a name. Then I wiped my face and drove back to Pittsburgh. That was 14 months ago. Here's what has happened since, because I know that's what people want to know. I know because I've needed to know that too. Every time I've heard a story like mine, I've needed the part where the world made sense again. My grandfather's attorney reviewed the original fund documents. The fund had been established as an educational trust, with my name as the sole beneficiary. My parents had been named as co-trustees, which gave them access, but the terms specified the money was to be used exclusively for my post-secondary education. What they did was, in fact, a breach of fiduciary duty, not technically theft in the criminal sense. The attorney explained this carefully, but a civil matter with real teeth. My grandfather did not file a lawsuit. He presented my parents with a demand letter, repay the full $42,000 to an account in my name within 18 months, or he would pursue legal action and restructure his estate accordingly. I wasn't in the room for that conversation. I don't know exactly what was said. But my mother called me 3 days later, and the conversation was one of the hardest and strangest of my life. She didn't apologize. Not really. She said they'd been under a lot of pressure. She said they'd always meant to replace it. She said she hoped I could understand, eventually, that they'd been doing what they thought was best for the whole family. I said, Oliver's braces came out of my college fund. She was quiet. I just want you to understand what you're asking me to understand, I said. I need you to understand it too. She didn't have anything to say to that. My father called the next day and apologized. Genuinely, I think. He cried, which I was not expecting, and I didn't know what to do with it. He said he'd been weak and that he'd let things go on too long because it was easier than facing it. I said I appreciated him saying so. I meant it. It doesn't fix anything. But it's real, and real counts for something. The repayment is happening. My parents are making monthly payments into an account my grandfather set up in my name. They're not comfortable right now. I know that. Part of me feels something about that, and I'm still working out exactly what. I put my grandfather's $20,000 directly toward my student loans. My balance is now just under $12,000. I can see the end of it from where I'm standing, which I could not do 14 months ago. I got a new job in March, senior editor at a digital publication based in Philadelphia. Better pay, better title, actually covers my rent without the mental gymnastics I used to do every month. I moved in January. I have my own apartment now. No roommates. A window in the kitchen that gets morning light. I'm not going to tell you that I've forgiven my parents. I don't know if that's the right word for where I am. What I know is that I think about them differently now, less like people who held authority over me and more like people who made bad decisions under pressure and then hid them for years because they didn't know how else to handle it. That makes them human. It doesn't make it okay. Both of those things are true at the same time, and I've decided I can hold both. What I will tell you is this. I think about that girl who worked every weekend and cried on the bus and chose the cheapest ramen at the grocery store with her student ID discount. I think about her a lot. I don't feel sorry for her anymore. I feel something closer to respect. She got through 4 years of college, $31,000 in debt, no trust fund, no backup, no one telling her there was supposed to be a safety net. She graduated on time. She got the job. She showed up. And she had no idea the whole time that she was doing it alone on purpose, or by design, or because two people who were supposed to protect her had decided, quietly, that the fund with her name on it was available for other things. She didn't know, and she made it anyway. That's the part I come back to on the days when I'm still angry. When the number 31,000 flickers through my brain like a bad signal, when I think about the orthodontist appointment my parents used as justification, when I drive past a restaurant and smell garlic and fried things and remember exactly what it felt like to carry a full tray through a Friday night crowd in shoes that didn't fit right. She made it anyway. I made it anyway. I think that might be the only piece of this whole thing that actually belongs to me, untouched and whole. The fact that I did it. Not because someone made it easy. Not because the money was there waiting. But because I showed up every day in a life that was harder than it needed to be, and I kept going, and now I'm on the other side of it. The chandelier at my grandmother's house is still too heavy for the ceiling. The porch swing still squeaks at the same spot. Christmas this year was quieter than last year by quite a bit. My parents came. It was careful and strange, and everyone was very polite. I sat next to my grandmother. She made the pierogi from scratch again, even though her hands were bothering her. I helped her this time. She showed me how to fold the edges just right, pressing with a thumb and forefinger in a motion that felt like it belonged to a longer chain of women than just the two of us. We didn't talk about any of it. We just made the food together in the kitchen while the December light came through the window over the sink, and it was the best part of the whole year. I thought a lot about what actually caused all of this, not in a bitter, circular way. I'm past that, mostly, but in the way you think about a thing when you finally have enough distance to see its shape clearly. My parents didn't set out to hurt me. I believe that. What they did was make one quiet decision they thought was temporary, and then make it again and again and again until the temporary thing became the whole arrangement. That's how most damage happens, I think. Not in one dramatic moment, but in 100 small ones, each easier than the last because the previous one already happened and nothing collapsed yet. But here's what I keep coming back to. Actions move in one direction. You can explain them, contextualize them, understand the pressure behind them, and I've done all of that. I've sat with all of it, but you cannot make them go backward. The $42,000 didn't come back because my parents had good intentions. The 4 years of weekend shifts didn't unhappen because things were tight for a while. My $31,000 in debt didn't disappear because the family needed the money more than I did, apparently, without anyone asking me. What my grandfather did, sitting across that table from me and saying, "I owe you an apology, we should have structured this differently," that mattered to me more than the envelope he put down, because he didn't make excuses. He looked at what had happened and called it what it was. That's not a small thing. It takes something to do that. A kind of honesty that a lot of people never find, because finding it means admitting you were wrong in a way you can't soften. And what I did, what that younger version of me did, working doubles at that restaurant on Ford's Avenue in shoes that didn't fit, falling asleep on the bus home, choosing the cheapest thing on the shelf with her student discount. She made a different kind of choice every single day without knowing she was making it. She chose to keep going. Not because she had any idea there was supposed to be a safety net, just because the alternative was stopping, and stopping wasn't in her. That's the thing nobody tells you about resilience. It doesn't feel like strength when you're in it. It feels like stubbornness or exhaustion or just the absence of another option. You don't know you have it until you're on the other side, looking back at all the moments you kept moving when you had every reason not to. I think about what it would have meant to have that fund, not just the money. Though the money was real and the debt is real, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but the knowledge that someone had planned for me, that someone looked ahead into my future and thought, "She's going to need something, let's make sure it's there." My grandparents did that. They did exactly that. The plan just got intercepted somewhere between their intention and my reality. What I have now that I didn't have before is clarity. About what I can build myself, about what I will and won't accept. About the difference between people who act with integrity when it costs them nothing and people who act with integrity when it costs them something real. My grandfather called his attorney on a Monday morning. My parents are making payments they didn't plan to make. I'm paying off loans I didn't plan to have. None of us is exactly where we thought we'd be. But I have my own apartment now, morning light in the kitchen window. A job title I worked for without any cushion underneath me. I made pierogi with my grandmother at Christmas. She showed me how to fold the edges right. Her hands were bothering her, but she did it anyway. I think that's where I learned it from.